Hey everyone, welcome to more Political Excess. Today let's do another deep dive into a U.S. Senate election. This time let's take a look at Maryland. It's definitely not going to be competitive, but maybe you're from there, maybe you're just interested. Let's get into it and start on Ballotpedia and get a little bit of background. The current senator running for re-election is Democrat Chris Van Hollen. He was first elected 6 years ago. He won by a margin of about 25 points. And prior to serving in the U.S. Senate, he did spend some time in the U.S. House. His challenger on the Republican side is Chris Chaffee, and as far as I know, Chaffee has run before multiple times for the U.S. House and Senate in Maryland. He's had no success, and I think he's fairly unknown. So let's take a look at their primary results, and Chris Van Hollen, he did have a challenger, but he won with over 78% of the vote. And on the Republican side, Chris Chaffee, he won with only 21.3% of the vote, and the next closest challenger got under 15% of the vote. If you compare raw vote totals from the primary, the Democrats had 194,000, and the Republicans had over 215,000. So that is a little surprising to see the Republicans get clearly more votes than the Democrats in such a blue state, but it is a primary. These results really translate into very little for the general election. So if we go down here and take a look at campaign finance, the data for Chris Chaffee is not available here on Ballotpedia. I would guess it would be extremely low. And we could back that up by taking a look here at the election ratings. And all three of the main rating sites, Cook Political Report, Inside Elections, and Larry Sabato's Crystal Ball, they all have it at safe or solid Democratic. There is no way to disagree with that in the slightest. It is easily going to be a safe Democrat hold for me. I think Chaffee's name recognition is probably very low, even though he is a perennial candidate and has run several times before. I think he has no chance in this race. I think he has no chance to even get it under 10 points. I kind of think he has no chance to even get it under 15 points. But let's go down here and take a look at the county voting trends on a presidential level. This table shows us that over 64% of the population lives in a county that is solid Democratic, and that is defined as having voted for the Democrat for president in the last three elections. On the other end, a little over 20% lives in 13 counties that voted for the Republican in the last three elections. There's four counties that either voted for the Democrat in the last one or two presidential elections, and that's about another 15% of the population living in those counties. And only one county is trending toward the Republicans, and under 0.5% of the population lives in that county. So it is a fairly blue state. It's right outside Washington, D.C. It has Baltimore, very blue city, but there are some red counties. If we go down here and look at the county map, the most populous county is Montgomery County, and that is really deep blue. In the last cycle, it voted for Biden in the high 70s. Another county in that vicinity, Prince George's County, almost 90% voted for Joe Biden. But you do see some red counties on this map. Most of that is in the Eastern Shore. Some of these counties did vote for Donald Trump by a decent margin, but nothing extremely lopsided. And as you go out to the western part of the state, in the Panhandle, that's where you start to see some much redder counties, even getting into the mid-70s support for Trump last time. So if we want to take a look at their YouTube channels, here's Chris Van Hollen's for Senate. There's a few ads on here, not a lot. I know he doesn't have to campaign much, so he's not going to waste his time. But what about Chris Chaffee? Well, I actually couldn't find a channel for him. I guess that's indicative of his lackluster campaign. But what about their official campaign sites? Well, here's Chris Van Hollen's. You can see what he's up to, where he stands on the issues. Take a look at his endorsements, etc. And as for Chris Chaffee, surprisingly, I could not find a current campaign site for him. Found an outdated one that had nothing to do with the current campaign. So even just based on that alone, I'm going to say Chris Chaffee is probably not going to be winning this race. Let's switch over to Wikipedia, and here we've got some endorsements you could take a look at. Chris Van Hollen, he's got a bunch on there. Chris Chaffee, he's got one. And there is one poll here we could look at. It's almost current, and it shows Chris Van Hollen at 56%, Chris Chaffee at 33%, with 8% undecided. We can compare these polls to 6 years ago to see how they stack up. And back then, Chris Van Hollen got about 61% of the vote. SurveyMonkey, which puts out all their polls at the end, they overestimated Van Hollen by a few points. But I don't think it matters too much in such a wide margin like this. So in conclusion, in this Battle of the Chris's, Chris Van Hollen is definitely winning this race. I couldn't even find anything about any debates. I would like to see one, but even if Chris Van Hollen wins by 30 points, I still want to see a debate. Or at least I want the voters of Maryland to be able to see a debate between these two candidates. So if that doesn't happen, it doesn't happen. But either way, Chris Van Hollen, he's going to coast into a second term in the U.S. Senate. And there's not much really else to say about this race. Chris Chaffee is kind of a low-time candidate. He's been through this before, and he has a total lack of support for multiple metrics from what I can tell. He should at least get 30% in the final results, but that's not saying a whole lot. Anyway, that's a look at this Maryland U.S. Senate race. Let me know in the comments, are you following this race? What do you think the margin is going to be? Let me know down below. And if you enjoy this channel, please like, share, and subscribe. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you on the next video.